Who's the worst playoff quarterback of all time? In their 2021 playoff run to the Super Bowl, the Cincinnati Bengals did more than come within a few points of their first championship in team history. They erased a reputation, a history of failure in big spots, a catalog of successful regular seasons washed away as soon as the calendar hit January. They took the sin out of Cincinnati. Now, some of you may have forgotten that dark, dark time, but of course I have not. And leading the charge for those futile Bengals teams was their devil-haired quarterback Andy Dalton, the living epitome of this meme. Dalton was never a force in the regular season, but he was always good enough. However, when the games started to matter, he wilted like the orange pumpkin he is. He wasn't just bad in the postseason. When you really study it and look at it, he might be the worst playoff quarterback of all time. Now, I want to preface this video with the fact that I didn't set out to make this episode. It came to me when I was working on the most losing teams in every sport episode. I've always known Andy Dalton was 0-4 in the postseason, but his terrible stat lines stood out. And then, well, I had to go and rewatch for myself. Born out of genuine curiosity, we will answer if Andy Dalton finally gets a postseason win as the worst postseason quarterback ever. Boo! 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 Today's show is sponsored by Good Chop. And my code, that's good 120. Now that code will get you $120 off your first 4 boxes of Good Chop meat. This summer, we've been out of the house a lot, at family events, parties, all of the things. So I had a freezer full of Good Chop since we weren't eating at home much. And I just happened to pull out a few of their salmon the same day my new box of Good Chop arrived. Otherwise, I would have smoked the ribs they sent me. The salmon is my favorite. Oh crap, what are we gonna make for dinner meat to have on hand? It thaws quickly, always tastes amazing, is responsibly sourced, and it takes like 10 to 15 minutes to bake in the toaster oven. But Good Chop really has any meat you desire, over 70 plus high quality cuts. All the meat is antibiotic free, arrives on your doorstep, and is of better quality than what I find at my grocery store. It's why I keep using Good Chop. And those family parties I mentioned, just used the Good Chop bacon for a pasta salad she made earlier this summer. So go to goodchop.com/YouTube and use code ThatsGood120 or click the link in the description below to get $120 off across your first 4 boxes. It's an amazing deal topped with Good Chop's 100% money-back guarantee. Now you may be thinking, what part of hell did Andy Dalton crawl out from? What Adam Sandler O'Doyle brother was he? O'Doyle rules! Well, he was a product of Texas Christian University, where in 2010 he led an undefeated Horned Frogs team to a Rose Bowl victory and left college football fans wondering what could have become of TCU if they were given a shot to compete for the highest prize in the national championship game. The NFL is more egalitarian, and he would get the chance again and again and again and again. That's 4 agains because he started 4 playoff games for Cincinnati. Now, before we get there, Dalton was Cincinnati's insurance policy against quarterback Carson Palmer, who was disgruntled after a disastrous 2010 season and desperately wanted out of Ohio. The Bengals might be the most stubborn organization in football, so while Palmer temporarily retired, they spent a second rounder on young Andy Dalton and immediately installed him as their starter. Now, I should note, Carson Palmer was 0-2 in the playoffs as a Bengals QB. If Dalton is the worst playoff quarterback, Palmer has to be one of the unluckiest, because in the wild card round of the 2005 season, Carson Palmer, coming off a year where he led the league in touchdown passes, threw a 66-yard strike to Chris, 2 first names Henry, on the first play, and infamously had his ACL shredded. 1 completion for 66 yards, 1 torn ACL, 1 start and loss for Palmer. Now, eventually, the Bengals traded Palmer to the Raiders, and Dalton was the unquestioned rookie leader, alongside wide receiver A.J. Green of an unproven team that was starting to turn heads in the AFC. The Bengals, who were written off to start the season, managed a winning record while Dalton tossed 20 touchdowns to 13 picks. They had earned themselves a spot in the wildcard game against the Houston Texans, who were appearing in their first playoff game in franchise history. And those Texans were shorthanded. Matt Schaub and backup quarterback Matt Leinart had both been lost to the season with injuries, leaving TJ Yates to carry the torch for Houston. But the Yates of hell were opened, and they were not kind to the Bengals. Dalton especially. Now, Andy Dalton dropped back 46 times in this game, threw 3 picks, was sacked 4 times, and never threw the ball into the end zone. Well, that's not entirely true. He did, except it was via a pick 6 by fellow rookie J.J. Watt. Houston emerged with the 31-10 beatdown of the Bengals. You can't blame it all on Andy Dalton, though, since he rushed for just 76 yards to Houston's 188, and the Bengals defense held Houston to just 159 passing yards and 1 touchdown? The Texans got 31 points on just 159 passing yards? TJ Yates, a third-string rookie, completed just 11 passes and still threw a touchdown to get the win. Oh, dear God, Andy lost to a quarterback who would go on to just get 10 career starts. But hey, Andy was a rookie. He got a pass in that game. Until it happened again. The 2012 season brought a sense of deja vu. The Bengals once again faced the Texans in the wildcard round, and Dalton again struggled under the playoff spotlight. He threw for only 127 yards with no touchdowns and 1 interception in a 19-13 defeat. His passer rating was 44.7. Somehow worse than his 51.4 when he fired 3 picks, so he was even less productive in his second playoff start. Throwing for more than 100 fewer yards, although he cut his picks down by 2. Matt Schaub managed 1 interception.
Ball intercepted this time. Stepping right in front is Leon Hall.
And still won the fucking game. The game was once more emblematic of Dalton's playoff woes. A solid regular season followed by a disappointing postseason performance. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on Andy Dalton, who had 0 postseason touchdowns to 4 picks. So the defense was actually fooling him as well.
It fooled me, we can't get fooled again.
Now, hopes were high in 2013 as Dalton had one of the best statistical seasons, throwing for over 4,200 yards and 33 touchdowns. The Bengals secured the AFC North title with an 11-5 record and were poised for a deep playoff run. However, a wild-card game against the San Diego Chargers, Dalton essentially shat the bed, maybe his pants. Despite playing at home, the Bengals were outmatched, losing 27-10. Dalton threw 2 interceptions, one of them going the other way for a touchdown, and lost a fumble, with each turnover contributing to the Chargers scoring drives. At this point in time, Andy Dalton had 2 pick sixes in the postseason to 1 passing touchdown. Gross. It was easier for him to throw TDs to his opponents than his own fucking receivers. While the score was 27-10 in the Chargers game, remember, we're talking about the Chargers, a near equal to Dalton in postseason ineptitude, and Phillip Rivers gets the dub with just 12 completions and 128 yards, meaning Andy Dalton has lost 2 playoff games where the opposing quarterback completed 11 and 12 passes. This was post LaDainian Tomlinson, but the Chargers were still 4 yards shy of hitting 200 with the combo of Ronnie Brown, Danny Woodhead, and Ryan Matthews. Andy had a respectable 334 passing yards, but so many of those were empty yards. In 2014, the Bengals once again reached the playoffs, facing Indianapolis in the wild-card round. The team was hampered by injuries this time, including key offensive players like A.J. Green and tight end Jermaine Gresham. Dalton, though, facing a depleted lineup, couldn't elevate his game. Why would he? He threw for 155 yards, no touchdowns, and a 26-10 loss. The Bengals were unable to score a touchdown against a Colts defense that was simply average all year long, and Dalton's inability to lead a scoring drive only deepened the narrative of his postseason struggles. The most heartbreaking chapter came in the 2015 season, a year that seemed destined to break the playoff curse. Dalton had a career year, throwing for 25 TDs and just 7 interceptions, leading the Bengals to a 12-4 record and another AFC North title. However, in Week 14 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Dalton suffered a fractured thumb while he attempted to tackle after throwing a pick. This injury sidelined him for the remainder of the season, including the playoffs. The lesson in all of this, just don't ever try to make a tackle, ever, especially if you're a ginger.
Gingers have souls.
This was also the season I stopped rooting for Andy Dalton. Believe it or not, I liked the fiery underdog at one point. But then J.J. Watt called him the Red Ryder BB gun.
Yeah, I mean, our goal was to come out here and make the Red Rifle look like a Red Ryder BB gun, and I think we did that tonight.
Whoa, 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 are you sure the FCC's not gonna fine you after saying that on live TV, JJ? This was Andy's response when asked about the comment in his post-game presser.
There's a lot of kids and a lot of people that look up to him, and for him to make comments like that, he's just showing that, that's acceptable to do that kind of stuff and say that kind of stuff.
Okay, Dad. Now, to be fair to Andy, it must have really hurt his feelings to hear his leading receiver in the postseason say that about him. Andy's response there was soft, and that's when I knew he didn't have the virility to win in the postseason. The J.J. Watt clip is on the NFL YouTube channel, by the way, titled J.J. Watt Makes Fun of Andy Dalton. It's the most innocent diss of all time. But Andy's reaction? You would have thought J.J. joked about fornicating his mom, or his dad, or both. Woo!
Shame on you.
In the wildcard game against the Steelers that season, the Bengals seemed poised to finally secure a playoff victory, leading 16-15 with just over a minute remaining. However, a series of disastrous penalties and the most untimely fumble perhaps ever by Jeremy Hill led to a heartbreaking 18-16 loss. While Dalton did not play in that game, the loss was the final nail in the coffin, cementing the Bengals' playoff misfortunes during his tenure. He never made it back. Marvin Lewis never made it back. And Antonio Brown never made it back to the realm of sanity after catching a head-to-head blow from Vontaze Burfict. The 2015 playoff loss marked the 5th consecutive first-round exit for Dalton and the Bengals, tying an NFL record for the most consecutive playoff appearances without a win. That is not a record you want. Dalton, of course, was only responsible for 4 of those 5. In those 4 games, Dalton completed 78 out of 141 passes, amounting to a 55.3 completion rate. He threw for a total of 873 yards, averaging approximately 218 yards per game. Most importantly, Dalton struggled with turnovers, recording just 1 touchdown pass against 6 interceptions. His passer rating in the playoffs was 57.8, a significant drop compared to his regular season performance. Dalton's best statistical playoff game came in the 2013 wildcard matchup against the Chargers, where he threw for 334 yards, but of course also had 3 crucial turnovers that lost them the game and sent them packing. It's also not like he was playing the toughest competition in January. 2 games against the Texans, 1 without Matt Schaub, 1 with Matt Schaub, another against Phillip Rivers and the Chargers, and the final one against Andrew Luck and the Colts. Now, none of those teams ended up advancing to the Super Bowl, and only the Colts made it to the AFC Championship game, where they were then systematically dismantled by the New England Patriots. Dalton never faced Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger. He was losing to a lower tier of playoff competition, not the Blue Bloods of the AFC. So, does this qualify Dalton as the worst playoff quarterback of all time? Well, let's look at some of the contenders and see if we can render a final verdict. Guilty, you son of a bitch! Oh, hold on. There are no 0-4 playoff quarterbacks other than Andy Dalton. He's truly one of one in that regard. Unless you want to go all the way back to Y.A. Tittle, who was winless in 4 postseason attempts, throwing just 4 touchdowns and 13 interceptions in the process. Those playoff starts came from 1957 through 1962, though, an era where you could literally smoke a cigarette in the huddle and do wrestling moves on receivers. I think you were fined back then if you didn't injure a player during a game. Now, if you want to jump ahead to a more modern frame of reference, I might submit one Big Kirko Cousins as a comparable playoff loser. In 6 career playoff starts, Kirk is just 1-4, but that one win was pretty impressive. He tossed a game-winning touchdown to Kyle Rudolph in overtime on the road to beat the Saints in 2019. No small task. And he's got solid, perhaps underwhelming numbers overall. 5 touchdown passes, 1 pick, and 209 passing yards per game. Kirk is kind of like Andy Dalton on steroids, with a line of credit at Kohl's that would make your grandma wet again.
Big Kirko wakes up dripping like this.
The numbers are better. The playoff record is slightly better, but in the end, neither of them have gotten close to sniffing a Lombardi. And I assume that's the first thing you do when you win the Lombardi. You take a big fucking sniff of that trophy, and then you lick it, and you rub it everywhere, all over your body. I don't want to make it sound like quarterbacks are solely responsible for their team winning and losing in the playoffs, though, because that's never been the reality of cold weather football against higher caliber opponents. Kerry Collins did what Dalton never could and advanced to the Super Bowl in 2000. Hell, he even got to the NFC title game with the Panthers in their 2nd year of existence. But his numbers are pretty rough. Over 7 playoff games, he threw 12 interceptions against 9 touchdowns with a passer rating of 68.1. He's best remembered for an abysmal performance in Super Bowl 35, where he threw 4 interceptions as the New York Giants were defeated by the Baltimore Ravens and their legendary defense. Warren Moon had a remarkable career in the CFL and NFL. However, his playoff performances often fell short of his incredible regular season standards. Moon made the playoffs 7 times with the Houston Oilers and Minnesota Vikings, but only won 3 of those games. His most infamous playoff moment came in the 1992 AFC wildcard game against the Buffalo Bills, where the Oilers blew a 35-3 lead, ultimately losing 41-38 in what is known as the comeback. One of the greatest comebacks in NFL history. Moon threw 2 critical interceptions in that game, contributing to the Oilers' major collapse. Then you have a guy like Tony Romo, also a standout quarterback in the regular season, but went just 2-4 in the postseason, directly ending 2 of those games with the botched hold in 2006 against the Seattle Seahawks and an end zone interception at home against the Giants a year later. Of course, who knows how we perceive his career in totality if that Dez catch isn't overturned. Maybe he goes to the Super Bowl in 2014. The difference between winning and losing in the postseason and your overall legacy is that slim. Looking at all of those quarterbacks, however, I don't think any of them match Dalton's overall level of futility. Given 4 chances in the wildcard round against lesser competition, you're simply bound to run into one victory. And that was simply never the case for Andy. He never got close. There was never a game where he played well and was let down by the team around him. There was never one gaffe by a teammate that made us think that could have changed the team's fate. He just never deserved to win any of those games. And the record and the stats both directly reflect that. And for a long time, that was the reputation of Andy Dalton and Marvin Lewis, who also oversaw Carson Palmer's playoff failures, which might be a bit harsh given what happened in 2005, but their reputation was the Bengals' reputation. They were chokers. They were frauds. That changed when Joe Burrow got to town and won 5 playoff games over the course of 2 seasons. And like Carson Palmer, he tore his ACL. And like Andy Dalton, he does great stuff with his beautiful hair and weird stuff as well. And unlike Andy Dalton, his hair is maybe getting worse over time instead of better. But with Burrow, that image has changed. And while Andy Dalton goes from team to team, lurking in the background, and the microscope lifts off of him, that playoff record will define him, and he shall remain the worst postseason quarterback to ever walk the earth. But then again, maybe Tua can come for that record. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on the YouTubes if you like this video. If you didn't like this video and you're still watching, well then you're an idiot who has no respect for your own time, which honestly makes us a great fit.